Okay, we're live.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I'm calling to order the Solid Waste Committee meeting for Thursday, August 15th at noon. Will the council members please introduce themselves?
Deanna Gwen, City Councilor.
Mickey Varney, City Councilor, Ward 8.
Linda Nishioka, Committee Chair. And will the staff please introduce themselves?
Josh Eagleson, Chief Financial Officer.
Ryan Zink, Franchise Administrator.
Kelly Reinebach, Budget Manager.
Great, thank you. And then may I hear a motion for approval of the minutes from our meeting on July 18th?
So moved.
Second.
Great, thank you. And do we all say aye?
Aye.
All right, thank you. Okay, Jim, Mr. Shepke. You are,
I was second.
but the gentleman that signed in is, he's gonna be in the presentation. So you are our public testimony this evening. Why don't you come sit right here with,
Happy
next to me, so we can hear what you have to say this
Okay, thank
afternoon?
you. Jim Shepke, I live and work too, and I'm here representing 350 Salem. And I hope you've all been keeping up with all the news about solid waste.
There's been a lot
There's
of
been a
news.
lot. Front page news on the Sunday paper by Tracy Lowe, who's an excellent reporter. She's been doing a great job. This is an article which you may not have seen. So I brought you copies. It's brand new from Isabel Whitcomb. I didn't bring enough for everybody, but I got enough for these people. And I really wanted you to see this because it really is very comprehensive and very up to date and contains a lot of good information. But I mostly want to talk about medical waste today because that's what's on your agenda. And it looks like you're going to get an excellent briefing on that. We appreciate that. We're very concerned about medical waste at 350 Salem. We know that medical waste is made up of about 25% plastic, and that when you burn plastic, it creates lead and mercury and dioxins, and we're very concerned about that in addition to the CO2 that's for climate change. We're told by a fellow we work with named Mike Ewald with the Energy Justice Network that our ReWorld incinerator, he claims, is the third largest medical waste incinerator in the US. He said, he testified to that effect of the legislature. And as you know, we passed Senate Bill 488 in 2023, and it actually limits the amount of medical waste that can be burned at ReWorld to 18,000 tons. And I can see from your report that's about what they're doing now. But this bill will mean that they can't exceed that in the future. And we're very happy to get that limitation. And we hope they'll comply with that. They're resisting other aspects of Senate Bill 488. We hear from the DEQ that they're not moving ahead to do the continuous monitoring that is required with Senate Bill 488. We're very, very concerned about that, and we're working with DEQ to try to resolve that situation. And that's all I can say today, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Can I ask a question, Jim? What publication was this in?
It was a website that's called
Okay.
Canary Media. That's why I had never heard of it. But I saw it, somebody called it to my attention, and I knew you probably haven't seen it. So that's why I wanted to bring you copies. And I made it large print.
I saw that, I need that. No, I just wanted to know, I just wanted to for the record,
Yeah.
but,
Okay,
Good question.
okay,
Any other questions?
okay. Thank you very much.
Oh, wait a second.
Okay.
I'm thinking Mickey might have a question.
No,
Okay.
no, just making sure. Thank you, appreciate that.
Thank you.
thank you, Jim.
Right, so actions, items, we have none. So we're up to management update and information items. Medical waste.
Is that me?
Sounds like we're struggling a little bit with,
I think it's very
Internet?
small technical.
Technology.
If we need to, we can skip and move to something else.
Certainly.
But
I'm there.
Okay.
Technology is our friend.
Technology is good.
I say that all the time. Technology is our friend.
All right. Awesome, okay. So we're continuing our theme of getting to know your solid waste system. And so today's topic is medical waste. And this is kind of the last of this kind of general topic, so I'm sure there'll be other things in the future, so, but this is kind of the last of this overall group of information. So, thanks. I wanted to just start off with, very briefly, there's obviously some regulatory authorities, state and local regulation around medical waste, more formally known as infectious waste. So Oregon Revised Statutes 459, there's a section in there that talks about the restriction of collection, transportation, handling, and disposal, you know, how infectious waste should be managed within the state of Oregon. Marion County Code, it's also talks about in the 8.50.080 that it's unlawful to place infectious waste in receptacle for collection. That's kind of a nod to residential folks that, hey, if you have sharps at home, whether you're diabetic or you test your blood or that type of thing, those should be managed through a sharps container and not just thrown in your trash.
Is there a definition of infectious waste?
There is, I did not include here, but
I was just curious.
yep, I can get that for you.
Okay.
Well, and the reason I ask is at my office building, we also share a tenancy with a couple of medical. And sometimes I go out and there's like stuff strewn through our parking lot, like gloves and different, and so that's why I'm asking what the definition is, because I'm gonna start taking pictures and.
So the definition of infectious waste basically is if you have a gauze pad that has blood on it and you can squeeze blood out, that's infectious.
Okay, that's disgusting.
Thank you. Well, we're eating lunch, yes.
All right.
So generally speaking, what most medical offices or dental offices do is if there's blood on their gloves, their gowns, or even if it was a gown that might have had saliva on it, then it goes into the infectious waste.
So it shouldn't be in my parking lot.
Should not be in your parking lot. And what I don't understand is if their bag is broken or why it's being brought out. Now, there is some, so let's say you have, because I started a medical materials recycling program. And what we have to make sure is, let's say somebody had a gown on, but that there wasn't any, you didn't see any blood or saliva on it because that didn't happen. Then that did not have to be disposed into a medical waste. That could be put into the normal trash. So, so if there's gloves on that they used while they were sterilizing instruments, then those don't have to go into the medical waste. So it's really any body fluids need to contaminate the material. So that, I think that's the best way to say it. So sometimes you might see things that you feel should be considered medical waste, but they may not meet that criteria.
Got it.
Are the rules the same for animals?
You know what, I don't know, because I often see vets that don't wear gloves at all. I don't know, but I believe they put sharps in their containers. I have seen that. So I know that needles and things, but whether or not they wear gloves, that's for personal protection.
Sure,
There's a
sure, I
distinction.
understand. Yeah.
So,
I was thinking of disposal, yeah.
yeah, they also have, if there's blood, they have to. I see some head shakes over here behind me, so.
Thank you.
Anyway, does that help?
Yep, that's, thank you.
And then our own Salem Revised Code, so infectious waste is included within our definition of solid waste. But we look at it from a very general perspective, pointing to higher authorities, essentially saying that all of that should be disposed of in compliance with applicable federal, state, and local law. So we don't address it specifically, but we're pointing to our higher authorities. So this slide may seem a little out of place, but I wanted to set the stage for just some quick stats real quick on medical waste. And so there's some definitions of the low and high volume on the next slide. But from just overall, kind of looking at the types of customers, or the number of customers, and just wanted to give some scale to this. So there's a low volume, which is 59 boxes or less per month collected. So this is done through Marion Environmental Services, which again, I mentioned this is a little out of context, but I wanted to set up the numbers here first. So 424 customers, if you will, for the low volume, 24 customers, so almost 450 customers, medical waste customers. Most of those you see are on call. So for instance, on the low volume, 352 on call. For the high volume, 6 on call. The rest of them, 72 and 18, are on a regular type schedule. These are most of your regular type of medical facilities. And then some information that, and we'll see why I bring that up now in the next slide. And then just some other context. We'd asked about, I think this body had asked about, some scope for in Marion County, out of Marion County. Of the total medical waste that's incinerated at Reworld, which is over 17,000 tons, this is for 2023, 96% of that comes from outside of Marion County. Within Marion County, 575 tons, or 3.3% of that was produced within Marion County in 2023. So, Marion Environmental Services. This is a company, a sub-company, if you will, of Mid-Valley Garbage and Recycling Association, or the Marion Resource Recovery Facility, the MRF, that you've toured up in Brooks. And so they provide that medical waste collection or infectious waste collection for all of the haulers of that group, of the haulers group, rather than each one having their own truck, their own staff. They've created a smaller separate company that just does this for all of Marion County and Polk side of Salem. So, which I'm very grateful for. There's 3 general service levels. There's the low volume, which is 1 to 59 boxes per month. And this gets into different rate structure for each of these. There's the high volume, which is 60 boxes or more per month. And then there's hospital collection. Again, I mentioned there's 1 box truck that does all of this. There's generally kind of 2 routes. One route, which is 1 FTE. This is a relatively small operation here, 1.5 FTE. 1 FTE runs a single route, which I superimposed a little map in the background there, but this outer circle represents that 1 FTE map where they start at the MRF, and you can see all the different types of facilities, whether it be doctors, dental offices, clinics, plastic surgery, urgent care, dialysis, retirement homes, tattoo parlors, veterinary clinics, physical therapy, schools, because they might be coming across biomaterial that needs to be cleaned up, or they have school doctors, school nurses, et cetera. Department of Corrections, eye care facilities, pharmacies, medical labs, bio cleanup companies, and pick up at the hauler's offices, and I'll get to that here in a second. That speaks to our residential curbside collection of medical waste and sharps in particular. At the end of the day, stopping off at Reworld, leaving all that there for them to incinerate, and then heading back home to the MRF, and then starting all over again the next day. That inside circle, which is about half FTE, is a route for all of the Salem Hospital, if you will. Think of that as a corporation. They have multiple locations around Salem, around Marion County. So they do have a route specifically for Salem Hospital, Salem Health Organization locations. So that's another route. So again, hospital, their emergency clinic, other health clinics, and then back to Reworld, back to the MRF, starting again the next day, or on the next day that they run that route. Next. So we want to talk briefly about, talk about number of boxes and that type of thing, and their different rate structure. I just pulled this out of our fee schedule. And so at the top, you see low volume, there's 20-gallon boxes, 35-gallon boxes, which are pretty much the same size as our 20-gallon cart or 35-gallon cart, just for perspective. So same rate in Marion and Polk County. We don't have a different rate structure for both, but we do display them here. You'll see then in the high volume, again, this is larger generators. It's a lower cost because you're talking higher volume. And then if you go to the next slide, highlighted, you see Salem Hospital there for the 20-gallon, 35-gallon. You notice it's a significantly lower cost per box. That's because they supply their own boxes. With the rest of these, Marion Environmental Services supplies us the box and the bag that goes in it. They pick up one, every one they pick up, they leave one. And so there's that cost of the actual box and bag that's being collected in there, where Salem Hospital buys their own. And then there's a cost down below. Let's find out just kind of what bags and some other stuff in there. But question.
Yes, I have a question. Do you know if the clinics know that they could, I mean, is that something that the haulers, Marion Hauler lets them know that they could provide their own red bags and boxes and save money? I'm just curious. Or do you know?
I'm not entirely sure. But I have someone from Marion Environmental Services who might have some information on that.
No, that's not part of the service offered, but I would suspect, because we're buying in bulk, it's cheaper for us to do that for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So again, in our medical office, we worked very hard at educating, because it's very easy to throw everything in the red bag waste, but it becomes very expensive. So back to your question about what goes in it, is when you have a needle and the carpule, if the needle can be separated, then it's best to put that in the red bag waste, but the carpule doesn't need to go, because if it's just been injected, there's nothing contaminated in it. So there's to save money sometimes, or amount of material that goes in a different location, education might be helpful.
And that is a really good point. So we do on an annual basis, we send out a letter to all of our customers, letting them know all the things that can go in there and then what can go into the garbage. So we do send that out annually for them. And then when a new customer starts service, we send them out a packet for that.
And hopefully that gets down to the people that are.
Right.
Sorry.
So I mentioned earlier that on that route are the haulers' offices themselves. So this is alluding to residential sharps collection. So all of our haulers, there's you see the right down at the bottom there, this is kind of an on-call type service where the haulers will supply a 1-gallon sharps container. And when that's full, customer calls the hauler, where they can either take it into the office, and many times that's at a reduced rate because obviously the hauler didn't have to go out and pick it up, but they'll call a hauler and say, hey, I've got this. And then next time, usually it's like a cart delivery truck, or sometimes you'll see the pickup with a trailer and the carts in the back. They're doing delivery or trading those out. So a truck like that or something else smaller like that, we'll be going around and picking those up at the door. It's not left on the curb. It's not where neighbors can be nosy about it. So there's some privacy that's provided that way. Also helps keeping honest people honest, where they're not going along picking them up, tampering with them, stealing them, that type of thing. And then the customer is just billed as those need to be picked up against, kind of on an on-call service that way. Then on the hauler side, they're now collecting these, and once they get a box full of them, then usually every month or so, then on the route, Marion Environmental Services will come pick that up from each of the haulers' locations, and then Marion Environmental bills the hauler just like they would any other commercial medical office. So do a pause. So that was the system. So we'll get into I want to talk a little bit about kind of where the last couple of years are, or the last year, and then kind of the COSA, that type of thing. But any questions on, because we have lots of experts in the room here. Any questions on just the mechanics of or learning more about medical waste within Salem and Marion County before we move on? Okay, so this is medical waste section B. We just did it. Just like with our other solid waste, we do an annual rate review of medical waste at that operation. Has some interesting things happen with some labor and long wait times at real world disposal and that type of thing. That if you look at 2023, doesn't look too good. But the good news is that those have been corrected. Looks like there was maybe some staff turnover on the driver's side of that. And so using what the projections and the actual so far of 2024, I think Dan was the first 5 months of 2024.
It's now 7, so I'm not sure which one you got. I think it was 6. But it might have been 5.
Yeah, the last one, I think it was 5 months of actuals of 2024, and then projected out for the rest of the year. It gives us an overall of 6.7% for the total service. You see the individuals there. There's some correction that's happening in the different line items, lines of business, and then projecting forward using the rate increases that council already adopted for calendar year 2025. We see that medical or Marion Environmental Services is anticipating a 5.3% return on revenue. Again, we're usually targeting that 10%, but with a lot of kind of unknowns with waste disposal, medical waste disposal, and some other things. At this point, Marion Environmental is not seeking an adjustment to the already adopted rate increase for 2025. And so speaking of kind of the biggest unknown right now, as we know, the medical waste, the sharps containers, all that is going to Covanta. Reworld, apologize. Going to Reworld for disposal, for incineration. And there's some, as we've talked before, there's some uncertainty, that the Reworld's current franchise contract with Marion County expires at the end of this calendar year. I think there's hope that will continue to be renegotiated and start again on January 1, but that hasn't happened yet. The current rates for 2025 would be, you see, we're increasing $75 from $150 to $225 a ton, and then again $300 in 2026. But that's for disposal at Reworld, as adopted by Marion County Commissioners. If Reworld is not an option anymore, then there are other options that need to be looked at. And folks at Marion County, folks at the MRF, Marion Environmental Services, are looking at all those options. So some of them could be taking them out of state, trucking different places. And I will say one other option that recently was brought to the city and to solid waste stakeholders, if you will. Not going to go into detail or name any names at this point, but there is an operation that is proposing a facility here in Salem that would convert infectious waste to standard solid waste. Processes. So we're working with them to kind of see what that might look like. Fortunately, the proposed cost at this point would be, as far as a per ton, we're looking at around $650 to $700 per ton. And the rates that you see here are very low compared to market rates. We're the only ones at Reworld that are getting this great rate. Everyone else is all that other 96% that's coming into Reworld outside of Marion County is paying significantly more than what we are now. And so there's going to be a reset, if you will, I believe, in the next 6 to 12 months when it comes to disposal of of medical waste, assuming Covanta, or in the event that Covanta, Reworld is not the place to take it in that same timeframe. So
there are some options. It sounds like there would be some options.
yes, there are
that-
places to take it, but
The rates may be,
different.
different's a good word.
Yes.
Substantially different.
Substantially.
That's a clarifying.
Yeah.
The good news, if there is good news, is that disposal is only a piece of the overall cost. So where we may look at 100% or 200% increase in the disposal, that's only a piece of the cost. So we're not necessarily looking at a doubling or tripling of the overall cost of the service, if that makes sense. But we should be anticipating some significant increases.
So might I ask a question then on that statement? And there may be somebody in the audience here that could answer it. Are there options that might mean somebody like myself who has the Sharps container for my diabetic cat would have a location to take it that could then reduce my fee? Or is there, is that just part of it, or, you know, or that's all
So
to be decided?
So if you're having it picked up at your house now,
Yes.
you can take it to your local hauler, and that's gonna save you a couple bucks possibly. I know that there are other options. I didn't list them on here, but for instance, my wife uses a Walgreens option. You know, where Walgreens has a
Yes.
thing and then it's a mail-in. So there are mail-in options. And
Yes.
I don't anticipate trying to go after the US Postal Service for transporting solid waste outside of our franchise, but I thought about it.
Ryan, could I just throw into
Please.
this? We wouldn't take Sharps container at our office with public services, doesn't, I don't
Okay.
know if the other colleges do not.
So yeah, call your
We just aren't set
office.
up to do that.
Yeah,
That's good to know, because that's who I have, so.
thank you for the clarification. And I'm making some
Yeah.
general statements. We have 6 haulers within the city of Salem. But that's why I always recommend, as soon as it's full, call your hauler and they'll give you options from there.
I think I was just trying to understand if some of the costs that are making it climb are really the delivery and the pickup and some of those services that many people still would need,
Mhm.
but that there might be options. That's always, but I think that will come when
Right.
decisions are getting made for
Well, and
how it will be done.
There are some haulers, like, we do accept it at our office.
Okay,
So I think with the medical waste and the Sharps, they have to go somewhere,
Yes.
right? And so whether that's to Reworld or it's taken to a place in Idaho or Nevada or wherever, and I suspect that even the mail-in options through Walgreens or through Rite Aid or some of those, they're going to an ultimate disposal, a certified disposal, not unlike the ones that we use within this area. So I suspect that as Reworld or some of these options that we have now are no longer available, those other mail-in options, we're gonna probably see an increase in cost for those as well, I
Yes.
suspect,
yes. Thank you,
unfortunately.
thank you.
Next slide, please. Thank you. Hey, Lauren, just as a reminder, this is what was adopted for percentage increases. We already have the 2024 in place. And then with that $75 increase from, what was it? From $150 per ton to $225 per ton, that's only an 8.4% increase on the overall rates. So again, we'll be looking at something like that in 2026 under the current environment, but we'll see how that changes. So, but that is the current already adopted rate increase for the medical waste. We're done. Any final thoughts, questions before we move on to our next fun agenda item?
the city also ends up collecting quite a bit of sharps. Through parks, collection through environmental
Oh, yes.
services. All those places, we usually take it straight to Commander.
I'm sorry, say that again.
It goes to the void directly.
Okay,
To where?
We will
Oh, okay, directly.
And where was
Okay,
that
we
from,
do that
the
in
city?
parks.
parks, needles.
Okay.
Parks,
and this is
then
from,
environmental services gets a whole bunch of them. Probably the SOS team also picks up.
yes, so that's pickup. Do we have any restrooms that collect them, similar to what you might see in the airport and things like
Yeah,
that?
they have the
There's
red
collection
bins are-
bins.
That's why we get a call from dispatch, they go out with the red bin, grab it, it's properly separated.
But I'm just wondering if there's any red bins in bathrooms that are actually collecting them? Or are you, because you're primarily talking about when they're visible and they need to be collected. I'm just wondering, like when I go to the airport, they have collections in the bathrooms for people that need to,
I'm not sure, but it would be a good parks question, restrooms in
Yeah.
public facilities. And if there are, we
If
do have
there's
sharp
any,
container or
I'm
not.
just trying to remember if I've seen any in public restrooms.
I can't speak to all public restrooms or other buildings, but I know, I believe most, if all the bathrooms here in City Hall have some, I know our bathrooms here for staff
Is,
have a sharps container.
I would
sharps
think
collection.
There's a collection that goes on.
yes, okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments?
That was so thorough, very good,
Thank you, thank you.
interesting information.
So I'd like to move on to and invite our guest for VHub. We got 3 chairs for the 3 of you. We need more, so. Do you have a presentation on the put here on the screen or just handouts?
Well, I'd like to start and introduce myself.
Please do.
I'm Austin McGuigan. I'm the Community Development Director for Polk County. And Polk County has received unsolicited a franchise application for a transfer facility in Polk County. Polk County's comprehensive plan essentially states that Polk County continues to follow the Shemeketa plan, the Shemeketa wayshed plan, and that includes the establishment of a transfer facility in the Dallas Rick Rail area, a drop box in Fall City, which is on the very far western edge of Polk County, and then a backup landfill. And our comprehensive plan provisions for this go back to the 1980s. And a lot has happened since then. We used to all have an IGA for the Shemeketa regional plan. And then we eventually, when DEQ sort of broke out our waste sheds to follow individual counties, we dissolved those IGAs. And Polk County has committed to continue to follow that original strategy. And so we were, with the closing of Riverbend landfill, it was creating some concern for us. And we were starting the process of working with our franchise haulers to have them identify an alternative landfill. One of the things that our comprehensive plan says is that we should have an alternative landfill in the county. And we don't believe that that's a likely or probable solution today. But we wanted our haulers to be able to identify an alternative to the Coffin Butte landfill in case of an emergency or a shutdown, and only if there was a shutdown or an emergency of the Coffin Butte landfill, and not for any type of a replacement. And we were starting that, and we were having conversations with some of our haulers, and then our Board of Commissioners received an application for a transfer facility in the Rick Rail area. And what we've decided to do at the county level at this point in time is to begin to have a dialogue with our haulers first. And we've had a conversation with all of our franchise haulers, and then to meet with all of the city's management teams. And we've completed all but Fall City in terms of meeting with our city's management teams. And when we met with the City of Salem recommended that we come and we talk to you today about really what the proposal is and what it would entail. And so I brought with me the applicant, and we're making the applicant available to all of city staff to be able to ask independent questions. And then Polk County has contracted with an independent consultant to assist us in evaluating the actual proposal that's coming in for the franchise. And we've done some of that work. We're asking for some additional information from them that we're going to continue to analyze. And then ultimately, we're going to have a public hearing with our Board of Commissioners, and we're looking for a recommendation from our cities as to whether or not the board should grant a franchise. And granting the franchise is very different than citing it from a land use perspective. So what's unique about the proposal that's come in for this transfer facility is they have an option to take advantage of an old dairy farm that you may know that's got the lagoons right by Highway 22 and 99 and is centrally located. And one of the problems with trying to site a transfer facility is really to be able to minimize the drive time for the majority of our users. And this is very centrally located on 2 state highways. And so that's very unique, but we're not evaluating as part of the first question is, should we grant a franchise for a transfer facility at the county? We're not evaluating the land use decision. And it may be that we decide that we're going to grant the franchise, but we may not approve the land use authorization depending on how they go through that land use process. So there's still some, even if we grant the franchise, some uncertainty. With that, we are hoping to be able to have a public hearing with our board and get a recommendation on that. We're meeting with Independence and Monmouth, the cities of Independence and Monmouth, with their city councils in a joint meeting on the 29th. So we're starting to engage with our city's councils. And we're hoping to be able to do that with the Salem City Council at some point in this fall. With that, I will turn it over if there's any questions for me about the process or what Polk County's doing. I'll turn it over to the applicant.
I had a question. I've been following this a bit in the Itemizer Observer and some of the comments.
Oh, wow.
So I wanted to know about outreach to the public.
What we're really trying to do is give all of our franchise haulers and our cities an opportunity to really identify what you think some of the pain points for your public policy objectives and for our haulers in terms of what it would mean for their operations. We want to get a better understanding of what those are while we're evaluating the initial franchise proposal. And then after we've had an opportunity for those types of concerns to be weighed, we will hold public hearings where the public will be able to come and testify to our Board of Commissioners and make public testimony, and we will have outreach as part of that. At this time, we're not at the county level, we're not doing any extensive public outreach. We're simply reaching out to our cities to be able to better understand what your needs and your concerns are, to see if we can address some of those with the applicant before we start that process. So one of the things that's really critical and I think important to understand is that in order for a county, a rural transfer station to work, is it needs to have essentially all the waste in that waste shed come through that facility, which would mean the waste that's generated in Polk County, the incorporated portions of Polk County, would have to go to this facility. And so we really want to have this dialogue to see if this is feasible before we start this broader or public dialogue. And so that's really one of the primary reasons why we're here today, is to sort of work through some of those questions first.
I can understand that, but the rumors are starting to fly, and it's nice to have for them to have the information, or at least the initial stuff.
We have been. I appreciate that comment. We have been starting to publicly engage, especially the direct neighbors around where the proposed facility is, and we've created a website. We've been in front of newspapers. We started kind of getting some of that public dialogue out, so that when we do go to the public process, it's at least people are informed that's coming, and then at that point we can really say, hey, we want to hear more public dialogue. Let's have it, and let's walk through this.
Sure, sure. No, I do appreciate that because I was wondering about that piece.
What is that website and is it up and?
Yes, it's Rehab Holdings. It's actually in here on the presentation, very last page.
What's in there, Justin?
Yeah, Rehab Holdings. Okay.
He's passed it off to you, so go right ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Nicholas Dahl, and I appreciate you guys having us here today. And I'm actually a third generation garbage man. So been in the industry since, family's been in the industry since 1964. I've been in the industry since 1999 when my father passed away suddenly. I was at Linfield College. Passed away for holidays, and anyhow, it thrust me up into a management role at that point. Finished out college and while working, so but we started early working, so that's something that was kind of part of who we are. With that being said, I owned Lawrence Sanitation, had a Kaiser, also Wheat Transport, which is a regional solid waste transport company that runs out of Resource, which is your marine resource recycling facility out of Brooks. And we are also co-owners in that, co-owners in North American. That's who we are. Meaning how we actually started, I'm gonna kind of walk through why we took a look at Polk County to begin with. And we started looking at Polk County in 2018, when we actually started looking at putting a facility in there. And what had changed at the time is at the time there's two regional landfills. You had Cotton Butte landfill and you had Riverbend landfill. Riverbend landfill was at the point of closure and it was changing. So you're no longer able to have two regional landfills in the Mid-Atlantic Valley. And you're limited options on where you can actually dispose of that waste. And looking at Polk County as a county that had zero other options. So it had one option to dispose of its waste at that point. And it had a lack of waste facilities, which is very unique. Most counties have waste facilities. So when you kind of look at the Polk County system for all the communities, it was very inefficient. It was running in all over the place. Every place from the commercial side of the world to residential, they had to leave the county in order to find a waste facility. And that didn't matter if it was for your green waste, didn't matter if it was for your commingled, didn't matter if it was for your landfill waste. You had to leave the county. You didn't have an option in your county. And so then naturally we started looking at Polk County a lot harder. We started looking at, okay, what are their solid waste plans? What have they identified themselves? They identified areas in the Polk or areas in the Rickreall area as the correct location for siting. We also brought on a logistics group to confirm that that would be the correct area to site a landfill, because it's all about logistics, all about timing to get it to a waste facility and get those trucks back out on route. So it adds a huge amount of efficiency into your system. Same thing with the public, right? You know, public doesn't want to have to haul their waste very far, doesn't want to have to be in line, that type of stuff. So you start kind of where around these communities can be site a landfill, or not landfill, transfer center. And so naturally it came to that Rickreall area. We started looking at different pieces of property around there. And it took several years to be able to actually find a property that would actually work for a facility. And so that was the Rickreall Dairy Farm. You had floodplain issues in the Rickreall area because you have Rickreall Creek there. You had high valley, low valley soil challenges. You know, you want to make sure you site these things to be in harmony with the environment and harmony with your neighbors. And so it was very important for us to find the correct siting location. So that was that. And I'll kind of go through kind of a timing. So that took us about 4 years to find this correct siting location, decided facility in Polk County. These are long processes. When you're in the waste industry, it's just a long grind. It's just part of what we do. And it's important for us to do it right to begin with and make sure, like I said earlier, we're in harmony. So that was a 4-year process. Now we're in the second process, which is the planning process and permitting and agreement processes, which involve a lot of discussions, a lot of different communities, folks such as yourselves. It involves a lot of different studies on the ground itself. Is this really a good site? Does it truly work? So there's a lot of environmental checks we have to go through. a lot of planning with design of the buildings and everything else to make sure it can fit on this site and that they are friendly and modern facilities. And we'll go through the modern facility too here. And so we did all our due diligence checks on that. And then as we're having more discussions with the county, and then now it comes to, we need to work to get a franchise agreement in place and then go through the entire conditional use permit process. At the same time, work with all the communities in order to have enough waste to make this work, because it takes the grouping of the waste of a county in order to make a waste facility work. And that's what we're working with everybody here on. So you have enough tons to be able to offset it. So really that takes quite a few years to get through that. And then 25, 27 would be our goal would be in the construction phase during that time, with a targeted opening in about 2027. So nearly a 10-year process the moment you start this. So it's a very long process. So as Republic knows, the challenges of, being in the waste industry and everything that goes along with that and how long it is to work on stuff. Now when we talk about transfer facilities themselves and waste facilities and how they've changed over the years. The early waste facilities, so used to have community landfills. Everybody had their landfill. I was a kid, I grew up, and we went down and watched the black bears in one of the dumps. We had probably, 24 of them that came in every night, and we're down there. So, but those in Lincoln County closed out, and they were put into first generation transfer facilities. Is what went in. And at that time, pretty much everything still ended up in a landfill. It was single sort kind of coming into the facility, it was going into the landfill, everything was that. And as the years have changed, you watch recycling programs start to come on, some of the first ones in the early 90s, late 80s. So that was starting to change. So now it's adding additional sorts into your waste stream that was not there prior. And you're watching green waste come in, and you're watching some of these producer take back programs start up and commingled recycling. And so suddenly your waste stream that used to be everything going to landfill is now becoming very fractured. And that's good, because as that means that we're able to start creating actually circular economy. But with that being said, so we've got, sorry, I'll slow down a little bit, but so first generation transfer centers, open tops, vector issues, wind issues, a lot of leachate issues, smell issues, a lot of that went on. Second generation, early second generation transfer centers set up to be extremely efficient, moving material through, but once again, they didn't deal with a lot of the vector challenges, which is smell, sight, some of the other winds, other challenges that you can have, dust, the rest. So as you kept moving forward, your early, more of a third generation transfer centers where stuff started taking place indoors. And then more and more regulations came onto that. As batteries entered waste streams and everything else, you started having other challenges in these facilities. So you started putting in air collection systems, fire rovers, like they're putting in right now at the resource, different challenges that we face. And on top of that, what you've gone now is a very fractured waste stream with multiple different sorts. So that's kind of where we're headed to. With that being said, the rehab for Polk facility, the transfer facility, Polk will be a very modern facility. Roughly 70,000 square foot will be the main facility. It'll be able to handle multiple different sorts, be able to go to multiple different end locations to make sure you can recover as much material as humanly possible out of your waste streams, especially if you're moving waste to Eastern Oregon. It helps out with the efficiency side of the world in that. And what it does is allow Polk County to re-bulk everything together. So when it does leave the county, its carbon footprint is shrunk substantially. Instead of trucks going everywhere on anywhere from a 4-ton load to an 8.5-ton load, now we're headed out there at 29-ton loads. So it's a lot different, much more efficient. And basically your transfer centers of the future are basically reverse distribution centers. So you take in the materials now, so they require a lot of space, as you're going to be basically collecting enough material to put into a large tractor truck to be able to move it to end market or end processor. And that is kind of, as these producer take back programs are coming along, further, that's what's becoming more important to create a more circular economy. And so this is really going to be focused on that. There's also going to be a lot of separation between commercial side and more of your public customers. And that the public customers will have their own entry standpoint, so queuing won't be an issue, efficiencies will be nice for them, flow through, but yet on the other hand, your commercial haulers that need to get back on route will be able to have their own entry too, so they'll be in and out of this facility extremely fast, so they can get those trucks back on route and maximize how many tips they can get that day. So it becomes a lot of efficiencies to your current system. So I'm just kind of go through, kind of open up, I guess, for questions. I'm sorry. I'm gonna take some time, probably talk for hours.
Well, I'm glad that
We're
you.
good on time.
Okay.
Yeah.
We are. So, do you have a question?
Not yet.
Do you have a question?
Silly question.
Yeah, it is. Go ahead.
Boy, where do I start here? If this transfer station exists, what happens if something happens to Coffin Butte and there's an emergency or they have to limit the amounts taken? Then what do you do?
So this waste facility we've already built this in to actually be able to move the waste to Eastern Oregon.
Okay,
So we can easily move it. There's a lot of different landfill options in Eastern Washington. Republic has an option over there. Waste Management has an option up the gorge, and Waste Connections has a couple different options up the gorge. So we are able to easily move that efficiently right up to those landfills that have 100+ years of life on them.
okay,
So Polk County doesn't have any redundancy in its waste stream system. And so Republic and Coffin Butte have been very convenient and affordable for our community for a very long time. And that's part of the reason really why we don't have a transfer facility. And as we look to the future, being able to have some additional options for what happens with our waste if something was to happen to Coffin Butte, is beginning to interest us in terms of a public policy standpoint. We would still hope that Coffin Butte would be competitive because it's cheaper to be able to continue to go to Coffin Butte. But looking out longer term, Polk County doesn't have any resiliency for its citizens. If we end up with a closure of Coffin Butte or something along those lines, we would really be struggling to try to leverage Marion County to try to use some of their facilities to help us with our waste. We don't have any other options. And so part of this, part of what interests Polk County in this is the ability for us to have a little bit more control over what happens to our waste stream and the ability to control rates. And that's of interest to us as well.
okay. I mean, I like the diagram all above. What happens down below? I'm curious, how does it get transferred into the larger trucks?
So within the building itself, everything will take place inside. So in the beginning, depending on locations you go to, you either install a compactor, and a compactor costs about $2 million. And so it just depends on the end market location. If we're shipping clear up the gorge right off the bat, we'd like to keep that efficiency as high as possible. And so we would look at a compactor side right away. If you're shipping to Coffin Butte with where tip and rate works for everybody, then at that point, you're gonna go more of the open top style and save the money on the compactor till that point when it makes logical sense to move up the gorge. And at that point, you have a lot of different options. You can containerize it and move it to an intermodal facility, whether that be barge in Vancouver with Tidewater or that be Millersburg. There's other options there that we can move it. So this facility is going to be extremely flexible on how it moves its material, and it can complement the resource here in this local community too, and that a lot of the high grade product can be pulled off of that can have a high recovery and be moved over to resource side of the world where they can recover it fully out.
Okay.
And I think to kind of go back to your first question about process, this is really a two-part process. What the county is exploring right now is whether there's a need for a transfer facility in Polk County and whether we should franchise this, not what it would look like and how it would operate. That would be a conditional use application, and there would be a substantial amount of public involvement in that. There'll be public involvement in determining whether or not we should grant a franchise. But we're really in this first phase, whether we grant a franchise or not, we're not really evaluating how it would operate, what kind of mitigation measures would be in place. A lot of the things that the public is going to have a lot of concerns about. This is really about in the beginning with whether or not we should franchise it, whether this is the right route for us to go, and for our cities looking out longer term, and is the timing right, all of those things.
Okay, no, that's really, really helpful. Yeah, that's what this is about. Just you did explain the first part is the franchise, because down the road, I'm gonna have a lot more questions about the environmental impacts.
I appreciate that because we've really worked hard to have a pretty substantial team working on this. And that is exactly the areas that we are addressing, is make sure it's, from carbon footprints to reducing resource circular economy. There's a lot of areas that we're really tackled and focused on.
Thank you.
And they have not submitted a conditional use.
Sure,
Right?
that
So
makes
we-
sense. Yeah, no, that makes sense.
Dan, do you have any? No. So I have a couple questions. So this again, as you're stating, is a franchise, the concept, the only location within this county. Have you done any comparisons to other counties throughout the US on similar situations that maybe you have been found in, and what they did? Are you utilizing some of that information to create this? So the answer is yes.
Yes.
And then is Polk County also potentially considering creating their own landfill?
No,
So
absolutely not.
so then you would still be taking it somewhere, whether that somewhere is, we don't know.
Yeah, so
And you're gonna be flexible on that based on what's happening.
So with the concept of the transfer facility is it creates one location that all of our haulers can take in all of their waste. And then that whoever has that franchise is going to be negotiating to get the very best rate for our haulers in terms of where they can go for disposal. And so really it's looking out longer term and trying to make sure that we have the infrastructure in place if we don't have Coffin Butte for how we would be able to manage the waste that's generated in our waste shed. Marion County has, they have several transfer facilities. They want to build 3 more transfer facilities. There are a lot of options in Marion County, and they're just for your citizens that are in Marion County, and there are no options for your citizens that are in Polk County.
I like the fact that you could, be accepting for public. And because we have the MRF, I'm wondering, are you also intending this to be bringing in construction material?
Yes, this would be bringing construction material, and then we'd be high grading off what material makes sense to get to the MRF or resource here, and not just shipping material that's not necessary to go here where they have a low recovery, it'd be a high recovery material.
Because as I put my head on my pillow, I worry about all of the construction material and where it's going. Like, really, why? But I do. So I'm also curious, how large is this site? And that this is on, and do you feel that is large enough?
Yeah, so we've tried to project it out for growth and over especially the next 20 years for Polk County. And we feel that this footprint meets the criteria that we need in order to make sure we can service Polk County fully for next 20 plus years on this site, have plenty of queuing space, have plenty of opportunity for multiple different sources towards the future, and have the correct way to store them so they're out of the weather, because we're on the west side. A lot of the challenges we have are weather related. And so to make sure we can handle it correctly. So we feel pretty confident in the site size it is.
How many acres is that site?
We're about 35 acres roughly.
That was the question I was looking for, thank you. And it looks like with everything covered, you're gonna try to mitigate a lot of the water that will be coming in
Correct.
just from wet things and the rain and all of the trucks bringing, that coming in.
So the unique part about this facility too is stormwater's separated out from where the waste will be. Where the waste will be collected different, so then your leachate will be collected into its own collection for the facility.
Okay,
With that being said, you also talk about the trucks and collection. On the exiting point where our commercial will be coming out of, there'll actually be a wash off. So underneath the trucks will be washed off as they come off the tip floor. So it's
So it
something
sounds
that.
like pretty
that's,
modernized.
It's very modernized
and looking towards the future.
and especially keep leachate and stormwater separate is absolutely critical for us.
It is
And
critical.
today.
So from today, when do you expect, assuming all goes well, when do you expect to have this facility up and running?
Our goal will be 2027.
Okay.
Yeah, that's on one of those. That's a pretty
Aggressive.
aggressive goal.
It is.
We're gonna have 2018.
Better 5 years, 10 years down the road.
I see it as you said 10-year mark, you got a little if necessary. Ryan, do you have any questions or anything that you wanted to direct us on?
You guys want to talk about what maybe the impact would be to the ratepayer?
Yeah, we can.
Oh,
Absolutely have that
Yes.
conversation. And I think, Ryan, I think it's important to know right now that there is a difference between Polk County rates right now, West Salem rates and Marion County rates.
Yes.
And part of that reason is because Marion County flows through a waste facility. So I believe the delta on the residential side right now in Marion County, the Polk is about $4 roughly.
I was thinking
on average.
it's about 20%
So
less, yeah.
this is coming in, we're looking around, on average around $2.50 per customer additional on residential. So we'll still be right there with Salem, maybe a little bit underneath where the base
Okay.
portion is at.
And we had our independent CPA, who you guys also utilize, Chris Bell, for your rate analysis to look at it, and he actually came in lower than the estimates that
Oh,
the applicant
okay.
had provided us in
That's
his
good.
estimates. And we've provided that, and we made our consultant available to Ryan so that Ryan could ask for very specific and more detailed information than what I know how to ask for.
And one thing that I appreciate is what we're looking at, part of that analysis is assuming, kind of worst case scenario is that it is being trucked to Eastern Oregon. And so we're looking at and then using that as a comparison to what those increases. So initially,
Would be less.
we may be even less because it'd still be going to Coffin Butte for a time.
I see, okay.
And so we're looking at from analysis of worst case scenario, and then I'll be working with Chris. I know that the initial analysis is being done, but kind of forecasting out what, the first 5 or so years may look like, just like we do forecasting for a lot of other things around here in the city. So,
And we're gonna do that for commercial now, so we don't have that information, that's one of the things we've asked the app, we're concerned about the impact on commercial rates and the economic impacts that can be associated with that, and so we're asking for that information. We're gonna have our consultant evaluate that. We'll also involve Ryan in that evaluation as well. And then anything else that, that you and your team, determine that we really should be looking at, we're willing to make our consultant available to assist in getting those answers too.
so I think we've talked about this, but I'll prompt
Yes,
question,
please.
is what does Polk County need from the city of Salem to move forward with this project?
So from our perspective, for this to really work, we're gonna need to be able to enter into an intergovernmental agreement on what's gonna happen with the waste that's generated in the incorporated portion of Polk County. And so we're not really interested in granting a franchise for a facility that isn't financially viable. And so before, I would like for my board, and I'm not speaking for my board, but before we get before our board, my board, what I really wanted to do is be able to weigh out, and have the cities have weighed out their interest in this and their willingness, not necessarily having entered into any kind of IGA, but your willingness to enter into an IGA in order to be able to facilitate this. And what I want to know before I get to that point are there going to be pain points for the city that we're just not going to be, that just aren't going to work. And that makes a very big difference when we go to start to have the public dialogue and how we evaluate this. And so that's really what I'm looking for.
So if I could
Yeah,
kind of put that into some other similar terms. So Marion County, we have flow control. Where Marion County says this is where the waste is going to go that's produced within Marion County. Just confirming. So Polk County is seeking a similar type of agreement with the city of Salem and other incorporated cities that we would agree to hand over, if you will, Polk County flow control, that waste that's produced within Marion County will flow. Polk County will flow where Polk County directs it to go, which in this case would be to rehab.
Do you know how many customers we have in Polk County?
I don't have I can give you in terms of percentage.
We have two haulers, and one of the haulers is here. They might be able to answer.
So we have Republic Services in Valley. Republic is.
I was gonna say, like, just behind the back, I was saying I should know that.
I'm just curious.
Significant.
Yeah, I want to say in terms of all of City of Salem, I think Polk County is about, I want to say 20% maybe of the total.
It's about 9%.
Not 9%, excuse me, okay. I was thinking of, close to 10. So, so 9% of the total volume that comes from the City of Salem. So as far as all of Salem, it's not significant, but it would be all of West Salem, so Valley and Republic Services. And so we would be.
It's about 56,000 tons of waste that's generated in all of Polk County. So I don't know how much waste is generated in all of Salem, but it's a very small volume that we have in Polk County. And that's part of the reason why the flow control is so important, is because we really just don't have a lot of volume overall.
I think Nitin wanted to.
I have a question from the point of view of just because I deal with the regulatory side of things a lot for the city. I'm just trying to figure out whether you'll actually talk with DEQ about where you will end up on right at the cusp of when you'll be ready to start generating your, or hauling your waste. You'll be generating water no matter what.
That's correct.
Where are you gonna take your water? Do you have plans for what happens with the leachate?
So we do have, there are different options right now. And one of them is if you take it into a city water treatment plant, where Coffin Butte and others take theirs right now, there is that option. There's also options of taking it to Eastern Oregon and put it in evaporation ponds over there too.
So just so that I can tell, we are really trying to not take any more.
Yeah, no, I understand. I heard with Marion County.
That's correct. Thinking that would be the most likely option.
Yeah.
So immediately the costs go up, the PFAS.
That's correct.
Is looming right there on that date when you are going to be out there.
And then that'll all be within, when we go through the DEQ permitting process, all of that will be done.
Yeah, so.
And that has to be part of your operation.
I'm sure that will come, and like, it was just mentioned that, but this is not the time for that discussion. But I'm just putting it out there that you're looking at.
I appreciate that. There is a substantial challenge with leachate in, especially the mid-Willamette Valley, but luckily there are options out there for it. So I appreciate that.
Thank you for that question. So at this point, do we need to discuss that flow control and what the risks are? Are there risks to us if that changes, and can you help explain that?
Sure. So I think the risk is losing control. You know, I guess to say this delicately, on the Marion County side, I think there's been from either management or council in the past have felt like they didn't have control over our waste system and where things go. We were at the mercy of Marion County in terms of, well, county says it has to go here, so that's where it has to go. And so we would be putting ourselves, on the county side, under that same type of relationship. Now, as far as the ongoing maintenance of our solid waste system or the operation of our solid waste system, I think there's a lot of benefits to that. And I believe we have a lot of benefits within that system on the Marion County side as well. And so I think there are some benefits to that. I think there may be some perceived risks when there aren't maybe actual risks, if that makes sense. But I think there's a lot of certainty. And that's what we're talking about here is certainty of where the waste is going to be going. But it requires, I really like this diagram here where it has all the different, basically right now, the individual haulers are taking it wherever they can get it to for the least expensive for that particular hauler, as compared to a consolidated system where they know where it's going. It's going to this one place. One of the pieces of the analysis is not only the disposal side, but the cost of hauling. And so for certainly Salem, Polk County side, the route times, the time to take it to the destination, that's decreasing significantly. There's a lot of savings on routes. It could even, for some of our haulers, so the haulers on the Polk County side, could mean that they get longer life out of their trucks. May be able to add additional routes as we have additional population increases without, so be able to manage that population increase without having to add more trucks. I think there's a lot of benefits to that. So there's some so as we're doing this analysis, there's an increase in the disposal side of things, but there's a savings on the actual transportation. So there's some offsets that way. Frankly, I think it comes down to our level of confidence in what Polk County is wanting to do and our comfort level with saying, yes.
We'll lose that control.
Right, and so I think having that open dialogue.
What I'd like to say is that, this Polk County didn't solicit this. We don't have a particular agenda. We're trying to protect our citizen base that also resides inside of the city of Salem from the future. And we are wanting to decide whether this is a good type of an investment for us to make. And we want to do this in a very partnering way. We don't necessarily have the answer. We didn't ask for something specific. And so we're asking you, like, is this a good fit for you? And we're asking all of our cities that before we really go a whole lot further, right? And so one of the differences, I think, in this particular instance is that the flow control that is in Marion County is a result of legislative action. And you're limited by what the Oregon legislature says you can do. How we would approach this would be through an intergovernmental agreement, which would give you plenty of opportunity to be able to identify the things that are important to you that you want to operate a certain way or be a certain way, and be able to meet that expectation in that intergovernmental agreement. And this is part of the reason why I want to kind of have this dialogue before we have a big public dialogue, because I don't know what your pain points are. And so that we have an opportunity to see whether or not it's a good fit.
I appreciate you making that distinction, legislative versus contractual, an agreement between them. So it was there, it just didn't come out.
Yeah, you did a very good job. I don't want to.
So my question again is, Thank you very much for this information. I'm making the assumption that this is not something the three of us decide.
No, this will come to city
Full
council.
council, yes.
So one thing this body could do is a motion to for staff to bring something to council with a recommendation, not that you're making a recommendation today, but for a recommendation of either general support or, you know, what, that's kind of where I was prompting, what do you guys need? Need a general thumbs up or
That's
a
right.
general thumbs down?
Yes.
Of something to council of that from a staff perspective, we are generally in agreement, or, man, there's a lot of red flags and which at this point, from a staff perspective, I'm not seeing a ton of red flags, so.
I think I would like to see a presentation to the entire council. I mean,
And that would be coming later, I think, again,
Right.
what Ryan is saying is that we make a motion directing staff to study this and bring that, correct?
To-
To council,
To council,
yes.
Yeah.
And then at that point, after council hears that recommendation that they bring forward, then we can make a decision about having them come for.
and we will continue to be looking at this, we're certainly not waiting for council direction to be doing analysis and all that.
And I appreciate the staff time that your staff has put into this already. I mean, we've been providing them with a lot of information about this so that they could, you know, evaluate it and really actually help us do a better job of really preparing and looking at the things that we should be concerned about. So I appreciate the staff time that your staff's already put into this.
So Deanna, it sounds like you're okay with a motion for staff to review this and then bring that to their recommendations to council. And did I?
Plus the presentation. I
Plus,
think
yes.
that's what you're
Yeah.
looking for.
I think there's step one.
I just feel like the entire council should know that this is like, how is it described here? That this one is steps above and beyond the fifth generation rehab. And I mean, to me, it just seems like, you know, when we're talking about technology, it seems like the goal is to be very sustainable, and this is very environmentally friendly. At least that's how it appears to me.
I agree.
I think I would like the entire council to get that feeling, not just from us saying, yeah,
No,
you know what I mean?
No,
So-
I understand. I think,
Yeah.
I think that what we need to do is make a motion for city staff to review this and have information brought forward on just that, if that's what staff determine. Am I understanding you?
I think so, yep. So yeah, and we can, whether we don't make the motion, or we can just plan to do it, we can bring this forward to the full council for a presentation, maybe something similar to today, with some recommendations from staff. Not necessarily from this body, but from staff as to what next steps would be.
Because it could even be like an information.
We could do an information report, or we could do, I think, a presentation. I don't know if it'd be a work session thing.
I think we would probably do special orders of business.
Oh, okay.
Something special. Okay.
We want to make sure that there's a chance to talk about it and there's a presentation. So sometimes information reports go a lot.
Don't always get.
Have you been involved in any of the conversations with this, or? From climate action, you know what I mean? I'm curious how this meets with our climate action goals and.
Juliana hadn't interfaced a ton on this, but I think that in terms of like the reduced carbon emissions and everything, I'll work with you to include some of that. With her, I'll work with her to include some.
I was just curious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. So in the interest of time, we do have one more thing I'd like to share with you, which actually talks very much on our climate action goals. So.
Thank you.
Exactly, okay.
Do we do anything there? I think they're just.
We'll bring up the council.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I was curious about just information or recommendation, and then what sort of timeframe they need.
So if you don't make a motion, we'll just plan to bring you a recommendation. If you want something else, then we can just tell.
I'm fine with it. I'm not sure it's going to have the information yet that I really want, which is the impact on West Salem residents.
Financial impact.
Both financial,
and
service,
environmental.
well, basically the impact of West Salem residents, and then I also like to hear from Valley Recycling. What their input is.
Okay, so I think, isn't that going to be part of what we're bringing forward?
And
That's helpful for everyone.
Yeah.
if there are kind of additional thoughts or other things you'd like to share offline.
Oh, here we go.
I'll sit down.
Okay, okay,
Absolutely.
okay, thanks. Sorry, I just wanted to say something before we should.
Yes,
begin.
please.
Okay.
I know, that's great.
Uh,
Thank you very
so, like to introduce, Julie and, I'm sorry,
You want me to
Jim,
introduce Jim?
Jim, I want you guys to introduce the public services.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Ryan.
Really
Good
cool.
afternoon.
Some cool stuff, good.
We'll try to make this really quick. I know my name's on the agenda. Ryan asked me to come talk about electric vehicles because we have some exciting news to share about that. But Jim works at our area office and he's been involved with a community in Colorado that just agreed to an all-electric fleet. And so he has a lot more knowledge and I thought I'd bring him along to talk to you a little bit about our electric vehicle type.
Yeah, so just so you have a little bit of background, so I'm the Director of Municipal Services. I work with Julie and 13 of his counterparts throughout our Northwest area. And so this gives me a lot of insight into where we are pushing electric, not pushing. We're working with our communities to understand electric vehicles and to understand it's not a pilot, it's not something in the future, it's today. And Julie's comment was correct. Louisville, Colorado was the first city in the country to decide that they wanted to go full electric vehicles. So they only do residential services there. So on October 1st, we will be running 4 vehicles in their community, servicing their entire residential population. They're a smaller city, about 5,400 homes. So they're really excited about that. Now there's a fight there's an Idaho firm a company that was like, well, our city gets a service, and it's like, okay, but the city of Louisville was the first to choose, is what we're trying to say. So they're first in the country to do that, and we're talking with municipalities who are interested in doing that about what it is. We've got lots of details. I know your schedule will last about 5 minutes about what it is. And so I'm not going to go into a lot of the details of why Republic is interested in this, other than the fact that Republic is not interested in running pilots. We're done with pilots. We're looking for implementation. When we look for communities and where we're doing this, and I will say that we have a vehicle that's coming to the Salem market. It's not dedicated, or it's not designated to stay here, but we're running some test routes and things like that. But a truck will be coming here in the next, I think it's due at the end of September.
Well, it was September, now they're saying October.
Now October, and those trucks, we're really running through the paces, okay? We currently have 10 vehicles that are running in Boise, Idaho. As I mentioned, we're running vehicles in Louisville, Colorado as of October, and we've been running a number of vehicles in Phoenix, as well as on the East Coast in Charlotte and other places. Yes, Boise was first, because they'll have 10 trucks. They have 10 trucks now. They've been running trucks for about a year. We also have a truck in Fort Collins, Colorado, which has been running for about a year now. And I should say, actually, Boise's been running trucks for actually closer to 2 years at this point. But they will have 10 trucks. By the end of this year, Republic will have placed 70 trucks throughout our service territory, throughout the country. And by next year, we're hoping to find enough partners to generate another 200. And by the year after that, another 200. So the goal for us is that by 2030, 50% of the new vehicles we acquire will be electric. That's all dependent upon the partners we find. Obviously, we need to put those trucks in the right spots. We need to find out where it is. And there's many questions about, hey, can they run a full route? Can they do all these? Do they work in the cold? Do they work in the heat? Answer is yes. Not everywhere. You do have to find the right route. And we look specifically, we look at the route dynamics that we run. We look at the infrastructure that's necessary, the electric company that's providing the services. Do they actually have enough power to generate these things? What type of power are they generating? Hydro, big surprise, is really great for EVs because it's not only cheap, but it's very clean and great for the environment. So we're looking at a lot of those places. And where we can't find, like in Louisville, where it's all hydro, we look for carbon offsets. So what we're doing is we're buying energy credits in Louisville to offset the electrical usage. So that is running on literally zero emissions. So we know that the electrons that are coming to us are coming from renewable resources, so solar and or wind and or hydro.
Chair, may I just interrupt for a moment?
Absolutely.
If this goes over a little, are the two of you able to stay, or do you have someplace else you have to go?
I have a 1:30. Well, it's with the city manager.
I believe he would, yeah. So maybe a few minutes.
Yeah, I'm fine.
Go ahead.
So
I
if
don't
you-
want to rush you, but I just wanted to see if they could stay.
Well, and please, if there's other questions that you need to have, I'm not insulted easily, so please.
I think you'll wait.
Alright, so we do look for the economics, the vehicle performance, we look for a nice setting of where those all that come together. Typically, what we're looking for is a truck that's running about anywhere from 8 to 110 miles. That means their whole trip to the landfill, to the transfer station, and or also all the collections. That doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're talking about a waste hauling truck, garbage truck straight up, it's really good for dense popular areas. It's also picking up 1,000 to 1,200 homes, so lifts we call them. So if you think about it, where they're picking up, and then you balance those out, right? So you get to longer miles if you have lower lifts, because you're all using electricity through that. But when we're running these trucks, and like I said, we've been running them for over 2 years, we're getting that between 80 and 110 miles per hour, and 1,000 to 1,200 lifts, operating about 10 hours a day, and they're coming back with about 20% charge.
Wow, okay.
So, and that is, I get a lot of questions about, well, but what it's cold here. I can guarantee you that Boise, Idaho gets really cold and it gets really hot. There's reasons why we've been running them in Boise, because we get some extremes there. There's reasons why we've been running them in Phoenix. We get some extremes there. And so those trucks have been doing that, and we're talking about that performance. So what does it do in the carbon offset world, which I know our climate group, if you think about a diesel, this is coming out of California, which has been more progressive in terms of how to rate vehicles. If you considered a diesel vehicle at about 100 on that scale, you can get an electric vehicle on the renewable energy on this side really down here to 0. If you run an RNG truck, which is most of the trucks that we run in, or a diesel truck, because all of our CNG we run on renewable natural gas, 100% of that, or 99.9%, we run on renewable natural gas. So that'll get on that same scale, it'll get you down to that 43, but on the renewable side, on the electric side, it really gets you down to 0 if you can get the carbon offsets. If you're in a hydro area, which is already running, like most of Washington, Oregon, Idaho, and California, then you're really getting those offsets even without having the energy credits. So you don't necessarily have to rely on those. And then there's also cost savings associated with the fuel associated with those trucks. What we're also finding is that these newer trucks, the new ones that we have are Oshkosh. They are kind of they're Volterra or McNeilus. They kind of come by these 3 names, but it's all one. These trucks are vertically integrated, where some of the first trucks that we put into Boise were basically a electric chassis where you took an old school body of a truck and put it on there and just made space for a battery. The new ones that are coming out are actually designed to be electric vehicles, and they're adding a lot more things to that you wouldn't think is as common, as in 360-degree cameras, which are commonplace in a lot of our commercial or our individual vehicles or private vehicles. That would all of a sudden become part of the EV. That's part of the package that they have. We've also designed it better so that there is more access for a driver to be able to see, right? You drop the windshield because you don't have an engine you have to get over. So all of a sudden now you're making a safer environment. Not only can I see 360 degrees when I'm backing or doing whatever, not only do I have regenerative brake, but braking assistance in these vehicles, but you also have better visibility for the driver. Safety for the drivers also, they're extremely quiet. One of the biggest complaints we have where we've been deploying EVs, our customers are coming out and saying, wait a minute, I used to listen for the garbage truck. I can't hear the garbage truck anymore. And now I missed it, I couldn't jump out there and get it, and that is one of the biggest things we have.
And another thing I'll just point out, because we've been talking about the heat in trucks and doing a ride along. There's no heat, in this truck. You're not sitting on an engine. So for our drivers, it's a really big deal.
Which is where, when you think about it, is you're cutting off some of the use because you're able to use, one of our biggest complaints is AC in the vehicle from our drivers. Well, you're cutting off the need for the battery because you don't have that heat to drive the AC, so it's got to fight with, itself to regulate, so they get a better cab environment for that. Offshoot of that, obviously, when it gets colder and it gets, wetter and things like that, you're using more electricity, et cetera, during that time frame. But similarly, you're not necessarily having to heat up as much of that engine as you used to have. So that's why either whether it's cold or hot, we are not finding the problems that we need to. And we're, like I said, Colorado, and we're talking about Boise, and we're talking about Phoenix, we're talking about a number of other places.
But they still have air conditioning.
What's that?
They still have.
But they still have air conditioning, absolutely. The cab environment
Make
is
sure that
quite a
we're
bit.
not just counting it out.
And so, there's a lot of features in the trucks that are really, quite a bit different. And that's kind of the view, you can see the front windshield that I was talking to, that's the view of the Oshkosh, the McNeilus Voltaire trucks that we have here, and you can see the design. They're a little bit heavier, not much, but they also get a little bit more compaction. One of the things that everybody's asked, hey, can you run a full route on it? Well, we were finding out in Boise with some of the newer, where you think about, hey, I'm gonna put all the recycling in this vehicle. You get the torque that happens in the back where you're trying to compact all of that recycling. Well, a normal truck would get about 6 tons per vehicle. That torque, because that added torque allows us to get about 9 tons per truck. So you're able to actually use it better and more efficiently. So you're getting some efficiencies out of it in things that we were not counting on. So in 2024, these are our research markets. This is where I mentioned we are going to be moving a vehicle here to the Salem, where we're running it basically to see, hey, wait a minute, are all of our plots right? Because I don't want to say EVs are going to be right for every vehicle. Some of the more rural areas, not one of your best options. But where you have dense, compacted areas, cities, great option for those. And we're really excited to be bringing those forward. Also, the questions always come up. So this is not specific to anyone, but when we talk about, hey, what are we doing? Who are we rolling it out? These are limited. When I said we're replacing, by 2030, we're going to replace 50% of our new trucks. We have a big fleet. We have one of the 5th largest fleet in the country. So about 17,000 vehicles that we run. So it's going to take a long while. And we get a number of cities and communities that are saying, hey, they're really interested in being early adopters. When we hear that, we say, okay, well, what does that mean? I don't want to give the impression that an EV truck is the same price as a regular truck. It's not. They're quite a bit more expensive. They require quite a bit of infrastructure that has to go in. And infrastructure that we're installing. Infrastructure in Salem, installed.
Complete.
It's complete. We did get some of the grants that are associated with that, so we installed that. Now we're talking about, hey, how do we use that? So these research vehicles, the ones that we're talking about, I mentioned earlier, they're intended to go out and kind of tease the market, make sure that everything is there, and then really they will be redeployed to areas where we say, hey, who wants to be the early adopters for this? And so my task has been, with Julie and her counterparts, is to find out communities that are really, truly interested in doing this and know that there is some cost associated with that, to say, is this something that is of interest to your community? And we bring back specifics to that community. We've talked with Bend, Oregon already. We talked with Corvallis, which was interested, and they were. But surprisingly, depending on, there's a lot of variables that go into this. So don't say I'm giving you a quote here or whatever like that. But the cost per truck can vary anywhere from, I've seen it as low as 70 cents per truck per household, to up to, like we had in Louisville, which is one of the higher ones, where they chose $1.36 or $1.30 per household per truck. And so they adopted $5 per household. Now in areas like, you know, in Oregon where you have commercial, industrial and residential, that gets spread across. So you don't have a residential fee as much as that one. In Colorado, it's just residential. And so they elected to add $5 per household. It's $5.36 with the credits per month to their household bills to say, hey, we want to be an all electric truck.
Because you were saying per vehicle, so if there's like recycling, green waste and trash, then it would be $1, whatever, times 3, yeah.
Correct, and that's what it is for, because in Louisville, they have exactly that. 5,400 homes, they have garbage, call it MSW, they have yard waste, and then they have recycling. And so you pair it in between those two, you figure out what they have, and they have 4. Now, the trucks that we're getting delivered, the trucks you see here are typically what we call ASLs. They're residential trucks. The ones we run in Boise, they do have some commercial rear load trucks that we're running. Those are done by Peterbilt. And these are, as I said, are Oshkosh. So most of the trucks we're talking about in this early phase are primarily geared towards residential communities, but it doesn't mean that the commercial vehicles aren't there. We do expect to get some of the first Oshkosh commercial vehicles delivered by 2026.
And I'll just say, we've been looking at Salem because our routes in Salem are really dense. They're almost a perfect fit for an electric vehicle. So there are some things that make it really ideal in Salem, especially the residential.
And the hills?
Hills are good and bad, right? Because they do have a generative braking on these.
Sure.
And, you know, intriguingly, I know we were talking about landfills, because we're not just talking about EVs for, earlier they're talking about landfills. We're not just talking about EVs for collection, but we're also talking about, and already have been running an EV for, what do they call that, the mule truck up in Wilsonville for about a year and a half. It's a delivery truck that's been running, and the charge on that one lasts about 3 days. And we ran earlier this year an EV truck for EV long haul truck, which is what takes it from our rail system up the hill, which is about a 4-mile hill, all that straight up, switching back and forth. And it's still got about a year or 2 in development for that one. But when you're coming down, you're regenerating power. So the hills go up, but when you're down, you're generating power.
Interesting.
So it's an intriguing time. It's an exciting time for us as we start to roll these out. And we're talking, like I said, we're doing quick spiels and then coming out and talking in more details for all the communities that are very interested in trying to be one of those early adopters.
And when this truck or trucks, because we think ultimately there are 2 slated for Salem, show up, we would really like to show it to you. We'd like to give you a ride in it if that's what you'd like to do. I've ridden in one. It's like riding in a giant golf cart. You know, it's a really strange sensation, but you know, you really have to kind of see it and experience it to understand the difference.
Do you have a question?
Are any of the other haulers looking at, do you know?
Not at this point, I don't think that, research, and we can bring more information.
And if we
back.
have one hauler who's thinking, of how does that affect rates for everyone?
That's a really great conversation. Yeah, so that's definitely something we need to consider. Because again, we're talking about, it was about 30 per truck per.
Well, we've talked about it. Yeah, we've talked about it with various communities, and it depends on the level of interest, right? And so I don't want to suggest that we're proposing anything because we haven't even talked with all of our partners, things like that. So, but in other communities, we've talked about various ways. We've talked about premiums like we did in Louisville. We've talked about surcharges where we've had other areas in the country where we have multiple haulers. But this city has a number of sustainability efforts. So they basically say, hey, listen, this is a surcharge on all customers. And then they basically come back and they say, and the surcharge for your customers are going to pay for that. Okay, and then the others, city retains that and does other sustainability programs that they have. I don't want to speak that we've ever, I'm not proposing that for any of our other, but I'm just saying that's been talked about. And then others are just simply where, It gets a little bit more complicated, but maybe where you're leasing the truck and you put that into the rate review, but it does become a problem where you have multiple haulers in there because you're trying to balance out, wait a minute, where are your rates associated with that?
I was just trying to understand how. that
Yeah, so there are lots of different, that's why I said I'm not quoting you on anything of what the price would be, and it varies depending on, the densities you have, the routes that you're running, what things are available. But all of the ones that I've done, the analysis for tend to be between that, just under about $1 to around $2. But I should say $1.50.
Jim, can I ask?
Definitely consideration we need to look at with our 6 haulers and how it's all gonna work out.
One question, if I could, what is the cost right now of an electric vehicle versus a diesel vehicle?
So it is changing rapidly. Basically, if you think about a $350,000 right now, it's kind of the ballpark. I think most of the industry says for like CNG or diesel truck.
Approaching 400.
CNG is a little bit higher. Diesel's gone down from, or excuse me, the electric has gone down literally in the last year from like a 900 to about 750.
So still.
And what's the infrastructure cost for like Salem too? It's fully installed, so what's the infrastructure cost?
Well, keep in mind, the pricing that I'm talking about covers all that. So and that's where when you were talking about sharps earlier, you talk about that big increase from $300 to $700. If you think about what it would, 2 pounds of that would be, which you might have those needles that you got for your gas, you might be talking about 30 cents a pound. So you gotta kind of get it down to that. So the cost is there. So the cost is high, there's no question about it. But when you're looking at long-term assets and you're looking at a 10-year term and you're looking at, especially when you talk about rate review like we do here in Oregon, where you get savings on fuel and you get savings on maintenance, there's a nice meeting point somewhere in there that the premium helps us get to quicker. So costs are high. They're, like I said, with the infrastructure, you're probably similar, you're on par with the RNG. If you're putting a compressor and everything else, you're on par with that. So about $1.5 million for all service. But when you think about that $1.5 million, that's also like when we did the Colorado infrastructure is about $1.5 million for all the work we had to do there. That was also for 60 trucks. So you got to spread that out across 60 trucks and then over the term of contracts and things like that.
Do you have communities that just don't want electric vehicles, they want to stick with the diesel vehicles?
We do. There are some communities that we actually, because they were looking at densities, and I said I would not send a truck there because I was pretty sure it would get shot.
We have a community in Oregon, in the Willamette Valley, that really doesn't want to have to recycle. I mean, there are those communities, but I think, those days are changing and I think those options are not going to be.
So long-term for Republic, are you looking for a wholesale switch or do you really see a mix?
There will be a mix is what we assume because we are going to, when I'm talking about rural Montana, right, I just can't run electric truck that far. We're only getting 200-300 homes a day and they're running 12 hours a day, kind of thing, right? So they're maxing out their hours that they go. We're probably not going to move an EV truck there. I apologize for going way long.
No, you're fine. I have a question and you're welcome to stay. So just yesterday, I went to the ribbon cutting for Chariot's electric buses that came in, and they were showing the infrastructure. A lot of work has to be done. And they were talking about, we got to ride in them. Senator Merkley actually got to drive one of them. And so there was also mechanisms where when they were stopped briefly for a break in between routes, the driver, that they can lower the bus and then that it gets some charge there versus the overnight charge and how long it takes. But a question came up that I thought I hadn't thought about was the risk of fire breaking out because of the batteries, and then what sort of protection might they be when they're all lined up together that doesn't spread, and what emergency products would be used, such as a fire phone that's on fire, you know, that. So they
Well-
were all working out those details. It sounds like you're gonna be a slower process in the sense you're not gonna take over your whole fleet,
Oh, yeah,
but
but we do take those things into consideration. I think somebody was talking about the fire rovers or whatever like that we use for the MRFs that we have throughout the country. Fires are always a concern for ours because you're never sure what somebody's gonna throw in to the MSW truck, whether it's batteries there with lithium batteries and everything else. We don't have the concerns about the vehicles fires, and then there's usually questions about battery recycling. And battery recycling is the way we've brokered this with the manufacturers is we have these trucks for 10 years. The trucks go back to the manufacturers, and the manufacturers require recycling components to batteries. So they're taking out all the precious metals, preparing them for new batteries. And the technology is advancing significantly on the ability to completely recycle the batteries. And so we are confident that by 10 years from now, that those manufacturers, even though it's quote their responsibility, that they're gonna have solutions for it. I mean, the federal government's investing billions of dollars a year.
yeah, and actually, one of the things that the bus chariots was talking about is that the batteries would be removed and then repurposed so that they would be a solar collector, like a battery that would collect
That-
solar, so.
That's where the manufacturers are, you know, they're coming up with a lot of the solutions. Like I said, our deal with the manufacturers, and we've dealt with a number. I've personally been in Oshkosh, I've been in Peterbilt, I've been in Battle Motors and a Mac version of them. They're all taking those into consideration where we look to see what they're doing and how they're doing long term. And our agreement with the manufacturers is what made us comfortable saying, yeah, this is the time to start bringing these out.
I feel like we're ready to, thank you very much. That was great information and still something else that we have to consider for,
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks also.
for the upcoming building structure. Yes, the meeting is adjourned at 1:40.